University's Question Time. I'm Gordon Watson. On our panel today, radio personality, former Labour MP for Brent East and Mayor of London between 2000 and 2008, Mr Ken Livingstone. Waylon Johnson is the crime reporter for the Times of Malta and a specialist in irregular migration in the Mediterranean. Sumin Hwang is a broadcaster and producer at South Korean public broadcaster KBS and a specialist in issues concerning North Korea. Tom Larkin taught French and politics in schools across Europe and currently works as a journalist for ITN. And finally, Molly Grace Malone is a social media activist who advocates greater youth engagement in politics. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. And of course, don't forget to follow us on Twitter. If you're tweeting the programme, use the hashtag CityNewsQT. Now, our first question comes from Jessica Wade.
Do journalists have a responsibility to tread carefully when doorstepping members of the public?
That's right. An inquest is taking place this morning in Leicester Coroner's Court into the suicide of Brenda Leyland, the woman accused of abusing the parents of Madeleine McCann over Twitter. Sky News' Martin Brunt confronted Miss Leyland shortly before she died. Waylon, your thoughts?
I think a journalist's responsibility first and foremost is to the viewers and their readers. Had Martin Brunt or Sky News gotten the facts wrong, this would have been a very, very different scenario indeed. However, this was a legitimate story. And I feel the level of abuse levelled at the McCanns by Ms Leyland was atrocious, and she was fair game.
Ken, what are your thoughts? Do you think that journalists and broadcasters should tread carefully?
Well, there's a difference here between dealing with someone in the public who's not used to this, which can be devastating. Most of the really bad people in our society, like Maxwell and others and Murdoch, were always insulated, and in Murdoch's case still insulated. Media can't get to them. Maybe politicians increasingly are surrounded by all sorts of PR people and so on. So it's the poor old, unprepared member of the public who might have done something wrong gets overwhelmed by some very aggressive journalists. I think that's perhaps rather the aggressive journalists really doorstepping the bad people rather than just ordinary members of the public who made a brief slip or mistake.
But in this case, Martin Brunt was not very aggressive, and Sky took all due diligence to be careful, and they didn't reveal the car registration number on the footage, did not reveal her name. Her name was only identified in the subsequent newspapers, which was not Sky. And when they took the footage, Sky actually got the lawyers in to say, is this okay to show it in the public? And the lawyers said okay. So I don't think in this case, it doesn't, blaming a journalist for being aggressive.
One particular case may be fine, but I can recall my mother, who was in her 70s, having journalists from the Mail and the Sun turn up on their doorstep and start to try and get her to say things about me. And I just think that's completely and utterly wrong. The trouble is, the majority of our journalists have to work for 5 billionaires who control 70% of our papers, and it's not about giving you the news, it's just presenting their tissue of lies and propaganda.
I think that's...
Yeah, I wouldn't completely disagree, but I do think that she took to a public platform to express her views, and it wasn't just one view, it was 4,000 tweets, which she consistently took to Twitter to do, and I think if someone does that, then they should be confronted publicly as well. I don't think there was really any real reason why Sky shouldn't have approached her.
As Ken said, Brenda Leyland's not a public figure. She's a sad conspiracy theorist
she made
with
herself a
fewer than
public
200
figure.
followers. She didn't make herself a public figure. She hid behind anonymity on social media, and you can admit that is wrong. And the tweets that she sent to the McCann family were quite despicable. But she was not a public figure, and I don't think doorstepping her is in the public interest.
Even when it's now a criminal offence to do what she did.
Exactly, it's a criminal offence, and it's not something that should be tried by the media. As a journalist, I can completely understand the temptation to doorstep people. You feel like you're on Rogue Traders, it's great. You get a great reaction, and it's good telly. But Brenda Leyland was someone who quite clearly, you can look at those tweets, it's someone who's not got the best mental stability. And I think you have to weigh up every single time you doorstep somebody, the journalistic merit versus the risk. And I think in this case, there was too much risk and not enough journalistic merit.
Ken, what's your reaction to that?
Clearly, there's an awful lot of sad people doing some awfully dreadful tweets and all that. Why, particularly, our candidate up in Bradford, the Labour Party candidate in Bradford's had all sorts of unpleasant tweets about her. It's impossible to track them all down unless you're going to break laws about confidentiality and things like that. So a lot of unpleasant stuff goes on. I'd largely, how is it a news story, you know? I mean, we just had an appalling budget. I mean, I'd much rather they'd been reporting on the evil of George Osborne than some poor sado.
Yeah, we'll come to the budget later, Ken. Thank you. We'll move on to our next question, which comes from Rosie Wright.
The Prime Minister has announced they'll only participate in one debate before the election campaign begins. In a democracy where media is crucial to accountability, is it right politicians have the chance to reject televised election debates?
Yes, this comes in light of the news that David Cameron announced this week that he will in fact take part in an election debate once the campaign begins. But is this just becoming a game of cat and mouse? Molly.
I mean, yeah, it's becoming a bit of a game. We're now, and it's been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks, having a debate about who will take part in the debate, and I can't see it stopping anytime soon, really. But I do think what people are forgetting is the fact that these people, politicians, they rule our country. They're not. Their job is not to give in to the plea of the broadcasters. They're there to concentrate on our campaign, on their campaign. Their priority is their manifesto and their policies, rather than giving in to what the broadcasters demand. I think, you know, David Cameron has now said he'll take part in a debate once his campaign has begun, and I think, you know, so what if we have to wait around for a bit to see what they want to do and when they want to take part? I think it's them who's taking part in the debate, and I think we should wait around for them. They're the important people that the British public need to hear from.
Okay. Ken, do you think that David Cameron is avoiding Ed Miliband?
Absolutely. I mean, Linton Crosby's broad view is that you don't allow the opposition to have a platform. And we all know if there was a head-to-head between Miliband and Cameron, it would most likely get about 20 million viewers, and Miliband has the chance to suddenly, overcome all the negative publicity about him. Cameron is so well known already, all that can happen to him is something goes wrong, and so they will stop doing it. I mean, at the last election, Question Time was due to have a debate between Boris, me and the Lib Dem and the Green for a week before polling day. Crosby put massive pressure on the BBC to cancel that because they thought Boris ain't going to do well. He's not on top of the detail.
Actually, Ken, do you think the head-to-head election debates that you did have with Boris, and particularly the ones on LBC, do you think that was an example of good open democracy?
Oh, absolutely, because you've got a chance to challenge your opponents. I mean, broadly, the Tory campaign is going to be largely about Ed Miliband's completely incompetent, a terrible nerd and shouldn't be allowed anywhere. They do not want to have a chance for the public to see him up against Cameron and make this. I'll tell you what I think. I think we should make it the law that party leaders have to appear in these debates, and if they don't, they're not allowed to stand.
But do you not think then it's just turning a sort of game of presidential politics, who looks the best, who can give the best spiel, rather than these are our policies
exactly.
and this is what we're here to debate?
Egos, which, if I remember correctly, was very much what your 2012 campaign was all about. I mean, those debates started with grown men, Labour activists in chicken suits outside City Hall. There was a brief intermission where Boris called you an effing liar 3 times after the LBC debate. The whole campaign was just a battle of personalities, and I think if David Cameron's resistance to these debates avoids that kind of spectacle again, we'll be very happy.
Sumin.
I agree with Molly that having too many TV debates can lead into just focusing too much on the appearances or how clearly they deliver the sound bites. The real focus of the election is the validity of their policy, and we have to look at the track record of the government, not their 90-minute performance on the studio. And I don't think we're depriving of any electorates of what their debates are, what their arguments are, just because Cameron has refused a one head-to-head debate.
But I mean, the fact is, the best way of looking at a government's record is having your opponents challenge it. And
Do you not have the Prime Minister's questions?
What happens if week in, week out PMQs, Ken?
no, that doesn't work. That's an absolutely embarrassing disaster because Cameron, I've never known, in all the
Thanks
Prime
a lot,
Ministers
Ken.
I've
I
known,
think
he's the worst
Ken.
of liars.
Ken, I think
he
it's
never
time-
answers the question.
Ken, I think it's time to ask the audience. So we'll ask the audience, if you think politicians should be able to back out of a television debate, raise your hands now. Okay, it's looking about...
The Tories, then.
Okay, so we'll take our third question from Rachel Stanton, please.
Chancellor Osborne has announced a new Help to Buy ISA for those trying to get on the property ladder. But how much of a difference will this actually make to those living in the capital?
This is where the government will add £50 to every £200 saved by first-time buyers raising a deposit. So I think we'll ask Waylon first. What do you think?
As a young professional, I think this is a fantastic Conservative budget measure. It's actually helping young people to get onto the property ladder. and helping people where it matters most, and that is saving money, which is the hardest thing to gather when you are trying to put together money to buy property, basically.
Tom Larkin.
Well, I think we can all probably anticipate what Ken's going to say on this, evil Chancellor Osborne. This isn't going to solve the problem of houses in London being expensive. The cost of an average house in London under Boris has gone up massively, and actually when Ken was in City Hall, the price more than doubled. The Chancellor does not think this is going to be a solution to that. There are measures in the budget to start building more houses. That's going to be the solution to this crisis. However, he can't just ignore the fact that young people are struggling to buy anything near to a house. I mean, I personally can't even imagine getting close to one soon. But this is a step in the right direction. 25% on my deposit is going to be massively helpful.
Simon.
The average deposit that UK people put down as a first-time buyer outside of London is 25,000, whereas in London, the first-time buyers pay an average of £70,000. And doesn't that make you clear enough that if you're living in London, this scheme is not really fit? This scheme is fit for cheaper housing markets, lower house markets in Midlands and North, and not in London.
How do you answer this, Ken?
The simple fact is we have a housing crisis because we don't build enough houses. Before Thatcher got in, we built between 250,000 and 350,000 homes a year. And then she stopped building council housing. Shamefully, Blair carried on that policy. And now we have a huge, we most likely need 500,000 homes just in and around London to cope. People that used to live in a decent family home, it's now been turned into 2 flats, 2 or 3 kids sharing a bedroom. Don't waste money pumping it into that sort of saving mechanism, which is only going to help the prices of housing go up. Use it to build homes for rent. A lot of young people, if a lot of people in their 20s don't actually want to commit to a long-term mortgage, they might move to different parts of the country or whatever. You need good, affordable homes to rent.
I agree. This scheme is going to cost the government about £835 million in 2010, and that money is enough to build 65,000 affordable housing, and that's going to solve the housing crisis of London.
I'm not disputing at all that we need to build more affordable houses, but at the same time we can't just ignore the fact that at the moment houses are out of reach for most young people. Okay. This is going to be a step in the right direction.
Final word from you, Ken.
No, they're out of reach because we've had a shortage of housing, therefore the price has gone up. To bring the house prices down in real terms, start building more homes.
Thanks so much, Ken. Coming up after the break, we have Alice Key with a new panel of guests and Ken Livingstone. For now, let's thank our panel, Molly Malone, Su Huyn Huang, Tom Larkin, Waylon Johnston, Ken Livingstone, and of course you, our audience.